Everyone in Milbrook called me Silent Sarah, sometimes the simple store girl, sometimes things less kind. I swept the dust from the general store floors, my head down, dress hem trailing, and tried to make myself as small as a knothole in the wide plank boards. Nobody saw me, at least nobody cared to. They walked around me like I was a stray tumbleweed blown in off the cattle trail, something to ignore or, on occasion, kick aside. Most days, I preferred it that way. Henderson, the store owner, liked me because I worked hard and didn't gossip. He was a big man with a beard yellowed by tobacco, a laugh that sounded like a mule's bray, and a sharp tongue for anyone who owed him money. He'd bark out chores. "Sarah May, sweep up the flour," or "Sarah, stack those peach tins," and I'd nod, quick and quiet, and do as I was told. He never asked about my past, and I never volunteered. It was a silent agreement, and it suited us both. But Milbrook was small and mean as a barn cat left out in the rain. Folks gossiped to fill, up the slow afternoons, and I was their favorite riddle. "That Thompson girl," they'd say, voice low but not low enough. "Odd one, ain't she? Never speaks unless spoken to." Some said I was touched in the head. Others guessed at heartbreak, scandal, or something worse. No one asked me. I heard every word. One morning, as I bent to sweep a corner, Mrs. Avery and her sister bustled in, faces pinched and eyes sharp. "Poor thing," Mrs. Avery whispered, though her whisper carried clear as a bell. "Never had a mother, they say. Father drank himself to death after the war. Some girls just aren't right from the start." Her sister tisked. "Maybe she just likes being invisible." Invisible. I held my broom tighter, keeping my back to them. A hot, shameful flush crawled up my neck, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. I just kept sweeping, moving the dust in careful little arcs, wishing I could sweep myself right out the door and into nothingness. When they left, I let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I stared out the store's dusty window at Main Street, sunlight turning the glass milky and bright, horses tied to posts, men laughing outside the saloon, children darting between wagons, all of them living lives I'd only watched from the edge. I could have screamed. I could have turned around and told Mrs. Avery what I really thought of her, of all of them. But I didn't. I wouldn't. Not yet. Instead, I picked up the broom again and kept working. Head down, shoulders squared. I wouldn't let them break. Me. Not by their whispers, not by their pity. If they needed me to be invisible, I'd be invisible. A ghost in broad daylight. It was safer that way. Safer for everyone. They'd never guess what I'd run from or who I'd once been. The next day blazed hotter than a blacksmith's forge. Sun beat down on Milbrook, pulling the paint off clapboard walls and drawing sweat from every man, woman, and child stuck to that lonely stretch of desert town. I opened the store early, letting in the stale air and the thrum of cicadas. Another day, another 8 hours of being as quiet as the furniture. Sheriff Wyatt strolled in just after sunrise, boots dusty, hat tipped back. He wasn't like the others. He'd lost his wife to fever 3 years ago and never found much joy in anything since, but he always nodded to me, gentle-like. "Mornin', Sarah May," he said. "You staying cool in here?" His kindness felt almost out of place, like finding a wild rose growing through barbed wire. "Best I can, Sheriff," I replied, voice no more than a thread. It was more than I'd say to most. He smiled a little, his eyes tired but kind. He bought a tin of coffee and a jar of hard candy for the jail, then leaned against the counter. "You ever need anything, you know where to find me." His gaze held mine for half a heartbeat, as if he saw through the quiet and the dust. Then he was gone, fading into the haze like so many good men in this town. I had just started restocking shelves when a sudden crack of gunfire ripped through the morning calm. The windows rattled. A woman screamed outside. My heart lurched. Old instincts flared, sharp and clear as the day they were born. Shouts rang out, hoofbeats thundered down Main Street, a shrill whistle of fear rising from the crowd. Through the dusty glass, I saw 4 riders, faces masked with red bandanas, rifles gleaming. At their head rode a broad-shouldered man with wild eyes and a black hat pulled low. I knew the look of trouble when I saw it. Jake Morrison. His name slid through town like a rattlesnake. An outlaw with a grudge, known for cruelty and vengeance. Folks said he'd once hung a deputy for looking at him wrong. Now he'd come to Milbrook and he wasn't here for shopping. Morrison swung down from his horse, dragging a townsman by the collar. "Sheriff Wyatt!" he bellowed, voice thick with rage. "Come out, you coward! You killed my brother! I'm here for blood!" Everything slowed. Wyatt stepped into the street, hands up, no gun drawn. "Let the man go, Jake. This is between you and me." Morrison laughed, shoving the hostage to his knees. "Oh, it's between us, all right. But it'll end with bodies in the dust unless you give me a fair shot." He waved his gun at the bystanders. "Nobody leaves till this is done. Anyone tries, they die." Panic twisted through the crowd, women clutching their children, shopkeepers ducking behind barrels. I shrank back behind the counter, breath quick and shallow, fear crawling like fire up my spine. But somewhere deep inside, something older than fear stirred. I hadn't carried a gun in 2 years, hadn't even let myself look at one. But muscle. Memory runs deep. While Morrison's men barked orders and Wyatt tried to keep the peace, I slipped through the back room, heart pounding, mind clear as ice. Henderson kept an old rifle for emergencies, loaded and oiled. My hands found it by instinct. Cold metal, familiar heft. I checked the chamber. Ready. I stared at my reflection in a tin panel. Not the store girl now. Not just Sarah May. I gripped the rifle and crept to the storeroom door, waiting, listening, ready to do what I'd sworn never to do again. The world outside had shrunk to the trembling stretch of Main Street, every heartbeat pounding in my ears. Jake Morrison strutted up and down the dirt road, pistol waving, his men spreading out like wolves around a lambing pen. Their boots thudded heavy against the cracked earth. Their laughter was rough, mean, full of the swagger men used to hide. Their nerves. Sheriff Wyatt squared his shoulders in the middle of the street, hands still raised. His badge caught the sun, glinting like a dare. "This doesn't have to end in blood, Jake," he called, voice steady. "Your brother chose his path, same as you're choosing now." Morrison spat in the dirt, rage tightening his face. "Don't talk to me about choice. He was my kin. You shot him down like a dog outside Cedar Ridge. Now you're gonna pay. Only question is, do I kill you clean, or do I start with the townsfolk?" Gasps rippled from the bystanders huddled behind barrels, and wagon wheels. Children's cries tangled with the wind. I watched it all through the store's cracked glass, pressing my body flat against the wall. A strange sense of déjà vu swept over me. This dance of fear and violence, the town caught between law and lawless. I'd seen it before, more times than I cared to count. Wyatt stepped forward, never flinching. "You want me? You got me. Leave the others out of it. We settle this outside town, fair and square." Morrison sneered, leveling his gun at Wyatt's chest. "I ain't here for fair. I'm here for an ending." One of Morrison's men dragged a young clerk, a kid no older than 16, from the saloon, pushing him to his knees beside the hostage. "More insurance, boss." Something in me snapped, a taut wire breaking inside my chest. For a moment, I saw my own father's face, how fear and pride had ruined him, how I'd sworn never to be powerless again. Not if I could help it. I slid, the storeroom door open, rifle clutched so tight my knuckles ached. The cool metal steadied me, old training rising to the surface. I slipped past the sacks of flour and out the side alley, boots silent in the dust. Main Street lay before me, bright and empty except for men with guns and one sheriff standing alone. Wyatt tried once more, his voice breaking. "Let them go, Jake. It's me you want." Morrison cocked his pistol, about to reply, when I stepped. Into the open, rifle raised, breath held. My voice came out calm, ringing clear as a church bell. "That's enough." All eyes snapped to me. Sarah May, the silent store girl, pointing a rifle straight at the meanest outlaw in Arizona territory. Shock held the crowd for a beat. Even Morrison blinked. I said, "That's enough," I repeated, moving forward, slow and steady. Each step was a piece of the old me resurfacing, the part that had chased outlaws and buried too many friends. For the first time in years, I didn't care who saw me. You could have heard a pin drop. The whole town froze. Morrison's men, Wyatt, even the horses, with their flaring nostrils and nervous feet. I felt their stares like needles. The quiet store girl standing bold in the dust, rifle trained, voice steady as bedrock. I didn't waver. Morrison recovered first. He grinned, yellow teeth bared. "Look at this. Store girl thinks she's Annie Oakley." He spat again, but I saw the twitch in his gun hand. "Put that down, sweetheart, before you get hurt." I stepped forward, boots crunching in the hush. "You think I haven't seen men like you before? Jake Morrison, famous for shooting men in the back. Heard you ran from Cedar Ridge the night your brother died." A ripple ran through the outlaws. One even lowered his gun, eyes flicking from Morrison to me. Wyatt's jaw dropped, recognition dawning. Henderson, peeking from the store, made the sign of the cross. Morrison's sneer faltered. "You know a lot for someone who never talks." I cocked the rifle, the sound snapping like a whip. "Folks in Cedar Ridge called me Deputy Marshal Thompson. Maybe you heard the name, maybe you didn't. I was there the night the Dalton gang burned their last, and I was there when your brother bled out in the dust after trying to shoot a lawman in the back." Gasps swept the crowd. Even the children peered around wagon wheels, faces wide-eyed. I saw Wyatt's face go pale, then something else, hope, rose behind his eyes. Morrison tried to laugh, but it came out thin and wrong. "You're bluffing." I didn't blink. "You want to find out? Lay down your arms and leave Milbrook standing, or I promise, you'll find out what kind of shot I really am." His men glanced at each other, unease spreading fast. One backed away, hands up. Another muttered, "She's the one who put down 3 Daltons by herself." The sun burned down on us, sweat stinging my eyes. My heart hammered, but my hands never shook. This was what I'd run from, the reason I'd swept floors and vanished into silence. Yet here I was, standing tall for a town that never bothered to learn my name. Morrison looked from me to Wyatt, then back, torn between rage and something darker, fear. For the first time, he looked small beneath that big hat. "You're lying," he whispered. I took another step. "Try me." A hush fell as every gun lowered, every breath held. In that moment, I wasn't just a ghost in the corner. I was the reckoning none of them saw coming. I could feel the whole weight of Milbrook pressing in, their disbelief, their hope, their fear, like the heat shimmering off the dust. Jake Morrison's eyes darted between me and his men, searching for bravado and finding only the shadow of his brother's last moments. Every outlaw's grip slackened as stories from Cedar Ridge passed in nervous whispers. "Dalton gang never stood a chance," one muttered, inching away from the main road. "Heard she dragged Red Dalton back alive, shot through the shoulder." I let the stories hang in the air. My stance didn't falter. "It's your choice, Jake. Leave now and maybe you get another sunrise. Stay and I'll put you in the ground next to your brother. No blood needs to be spilled if you turn and ride out." Morrison's jaw worked, sweat shining on his brow. "You think you can scare me with bedtime tales, girl?" "I don't care if you're scared," I answered. "But your boys." I nodded to the trembling outlaws. They've heard what I did at Cedar Ridge, and they believe it, which means you're running out of friends. One of his men dropped his gun outright, backing toward his horse. I'm not dying for your grudge, Jake. The power shifted so fast you could taste it, like the air before a monsoon. For so long I'd been the silent watcher, but now the whole street saw me for what I was. Not broken, not simple, but dangerous and unafraid. The crowd of townsfolk started to edge closer, their fear melting into something like awe. Jake tried to rally his men, shouting, "Get back here, she's bluffing!" They didn't listen. Another outlaw, thin, with a scar along his cheek, called, "I seen what she did to Red Dalton. Ain't worth it, boss." I lowered my rifle just enough to let him see my eyes. "You want to test the legend, Jake? You go right ahead, but you better make your first shot count because I won't miss." A tense silence. Morrison's bravado finally collapsed, shoulders slumping. He holstered his pistol, spit in the dirt, and glared at me with all the hatred he could muster. "This ain't over, Marshal," he hissed. "Next time I'll come for you first." I stared him down. "You come back, you'll wish you hadn't." One by one, his gang mounted up, shame and fear twisting their faces. They rode out of Milbrook, spurs jangling, leaving a silence thicker than any bullet storm. When the last hoofbeat faded, Sheriff Wyatt let out a breath that seemed to carry the whole town's relief. I stayed right where I was, rifle lowered but still ready, the eyes of Milbrook fixed on me. No longer silent, no longer invisible, but something entirely new. As the dust settled and the outlaws' silhouettes shrank against the shimmering horizon, the townspeople began to emerge. They spilled from behind wagons, peeked from alleys, and slipped out of shops, faces a mixture of disbelief and wonder. Even old Mrs. Avery, always first with the cruelest gossip, stood at the edge of the boardwalk, hand clutching her apron, eyes wide as silver dollars. Sheriff Wyatt approached me first. He tipped his hat, voice unsteady. "Sarah, Deputy Marshal Thompson, is it really you?" I set the rifle down gently on the store steps. For a long moment I just looked at Wyatt, at the town, at the faces that never saw me till today. "It's just Sarah now," I said. "I gave up the badge after Cedar Ridge, gave it up for good reason." A hush lingered. Wyatt hesitated, then asked what everyone else wondered. "Why'd you leave it behind?" I sat on the step, the rifle across my knees, the whole town close enough to hear. "I spent 10 years chasing men like Jake Morrison. Always running, never sleeping, never safe. Cedar Ridge broke something in me. After that, I just wanted to be quiet for a while, to be left alone, maybe even forgotten." A ripple ran through the crowd. Sympathy, understanding, regret. I saw Henderson shift his weight, his mouth opening and closing as if he wanted to apologize for years of silence. Mrs. Avery stared at her shoes, shame coloring her cheeks. Wyatt knelt beside me, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard. "We should have seen you, Sarah. Should have treated you better. I'm sorry." I shrugged, half smiling, half sad. "Most days, I was glad nobody noticed. It's easier that way. But you can only hide for so long." He looked at me, real concern in his eyes. "You think you'll ever pick it up again? The badge? The fight?" I thought of Cedar Ridge, of blood on my hands, of all the nights spent, wishing I could disappear. "I'm tired, Sheriff. Real tired. I don't want to live by the gun anymore. But if trouble comes to Milbrook again..." I let the sentence hang, unfinished but understood. The townsfolk drifted closer, no longer looking through me but at me. Curious, grateful, maybe a little ashamed. I let them see me this once. My scars, my strength, my longing for peace. "Thank you, Sarah," Wyatt said, his gratitude plain, "for saving us, for reminding us who you are." For the first time in years, I let myself feel seen. Not as a curiosity or a shadow, but as a person who'd survived more than anyone knew, and chose to keep surviving, no matter what they said. Word travels faster than any horse out here, especially when it's good for a story. By sundown, every porch and parlor in Milbrook buzzed with new tales. How Sarah May Thompson, the silent store girl, stared down Jake Morrison and sent his gang, running without firing a single shot. The legend stretched and grew, every retelling adding grit and polish until I became something almost mythical. Part ghost, part gunslinger, part savior. For once, I didn't mind. The townsfolk treated me different now. Children, once wary, snuck peeks through the window while I swept, whispering my name like it meant something. Henderson stopped barking orders and started asking if I needed water, if I wanted to sit. Even Mrs. Avery brought me a slice of pie, mumbling about gratitude. As she shuffled away, I suppose respect looks different on everyone. Sheriff Wyatt visited more often, sometimes just to tip his hat and share a word, sometimes to sit on the steps and watch the sun go down. He asked if I ever thought about taking up the badge again. "We could use someone like you," he said one quiet evening. "Town's changing. I don't want to stand alone if trouble comes again." It was tempting. I felt a tug inside, old instincts, a spark I thought I'd drowned in silence and routine. Yet part of me longed for peace, for days spent sweeping floors instead of chasing down violence. One night, Wyatt laid the star badge in my palm, its silver worn and warm from his hand. "Just think about it, Sarah," he said. "You'd make Milbrook proud. You already have." I turned the badge over and over, feeling the weight of all it meant. Duty, sacrifice, the end of invisibility. Could I really go back to that life? Did I want to? The next morning, I found a note slipped under the store's door. The handwriting was shaky. "Thank you for saving us. We were wrong about you. We're glad you're here." It wasn't signed, but it didn't have to be. For the first time in years, I felt something settle in my chest, a sense of belonging, of respect, earned not by words but by action. I hadn't just saved the town. I'd saved something inside myself. But as I swept the dust from the store, I realized the choice was still mine. To stay in the quiet or step back into the light, badge and all. Jake Morrison's days were numbered after Milbrook. Word came weeks later. He'd tried to rob a freight wagon near Dry Creek, only to end up face down in the dirt, bounty hunters splitting his reward and his gang scattering for the border. The shadow he'd cast over Milbrook faded, replaced by a new kind of talk, a new kind of hope. I started bringing coffee to the sheriff's office most mornings. Wyatt always had a seat for me, the badge sitting between us on the desk like an unanswered question. "We still need a deputy, Sarah," he'd say, smile easy but eyes searching. "You sure you want to keep hiding in that store?" I never answered right away. Some days I thought about the peace I'd found in silence, the safety, the solitude. But more and more I found myself watching over the town, feeling that old protective ache. I'd catch a stranger lingering too long near the schoolhouse or hear rough voices on the wind, and the part of me that was Deputy Marshal Thompson would come alive again. One cool morning, I brought Wyatt his coffee, black and strong as always. I set it down, my fingers lingering on the cup. "You still got that deputy's star?" I asked, voice soft. He grinned wide, hope lighting his tired face. "Sure do." The word spread like wildfire. Sarah May Thompson was sworn in as Milbrook's new deputy on the front steps of the jailhouse in full view of the whole town. Wyatt pinned the badge to my dress, and for the first time, I didn't shrink from the attention. The folks who'd once whispered behind my back now cheered, their applause echoing down Main Street. As I looked out at them, I felt a peace deeper than any silence I'd ever known, a belonging that came not from disappearing, but from being seen, scars and all. I wasn't just the silent store girl or the legend from Cedar Ridge. I was both. I was whole. That night, as dusk settled over Milbrook, Wyatt and I sat on the steps, sharing the quiet. He handed me a cup of coffee, and we watched the lanterns flicker in every window, a town finally at ease. I rested my hand on the badge, warm against my chest, and smiled at the memory of the old gossip, how wrong they'd been about me. I'd spent years hiding but found the truth. Sometimes the only way to keep your peace is to fight for it. For the first time, I was exactly where I was meant to be, protecting my people, on my own terms, never underestimating the power of the quiet ones.